Hey everyone, I'm Pat Schlapper with BassResource.com, and today we're going to kind of break down my approach to fishing tubes in the summertime, and we're going to do two parts, largemouth and smallmouth. So the first part is going to be, I'm going to talk about smallmouth, and with smallmouth I keep it pretty simple with the tube. I'm going to rig it basically on an insert head, which there's two different ones that I'm going to show you. This is a little guy. This is a little tiny mini tube. It's a big bite. It's a 2.5 inch tube, and a lot of times in the summer there's a lot of juvenile crawfish down there, and freshly hatched perch fry, just real small forage that those fish are targeting. And I really like to throw that little tube. And with this tube, I rig it with a little different head than a lot of people. So this is your standard insert head where you slide it up in. It's a teardrop shape. The weight is distributed throughout, about half of the shank of the hook. So what happens with this style head, when you kind of snap it off the bottom, is it's going to give you a lot more erratic, almost like a spiraling action, which is good in a lot of cases. But when I'm fishing real close to the bottom where it's mainly crawfish eaters, I like to put a football head in there. So with a football head, it does two things. The first thing is it gives it more of a kind of a goby profile where it gets fat up front and it slims down, just a real natural look. So that's the first thing it does. It just kind of gives that flared end on there. The second thing it does is it puts all that weight up at the front of the hook. So this rig isn't going to spiral near as much as the traditional teardrop head. This is more going to fall straight down. And what that allows it for is just a little different action. And this I'm dragging on the bottom. That's what I'm doing. So I think that football head just gives it a little more natural, looks like just a crawdad scooting along the bottom, kicking it up, like a traditional big football jig you'd throw. So that's something not a lot of people do. That's kind of a niche thing that, like, up north where I'm from, we started to do. And I think it does make a difference in a lot of situations. They still will bite the teardrop head, but in the summer I really like that football head. Or if we go to like the St. Lawrence River, somewhere where there's a lot of gobies, I really feel like that flared end gets you a few extra bites. So that's what I'm going to throw most of the time. 1/4 ounce or a 3/8 ounce head. On the little 2.5 inch tube. I will throw the bigger tube too, but in the summer I'm going to be more concentrating out a little bit deeper. I'm going to be in that 12 to 25 foot of water, rock, sand, and grass. Those are the three main things I'm going to be fishing for smallmouth. If you can find a combination of all three, that's great. Probably the best is going to be if you can find a rock area with open sand patches. A lot of people don't talk about that. Everybody thinks about rock for smallmouth, but where a lot of your big ones are, or your concentrations of fish are, will be in sand pockets within those rock areas, whether it's on a flat, on a deep hump, on a long point. And in the way I always try to explain to people, when those fish on rocks generally are eating crayfish, generally. Not saying they won't eat something else if it comes by, but when those crayfish are in the rocks, they got to sit there and wait for them to come out of the rock, a little gap in the rocks, and try to eat them. If one comes scooting across the sand patch, they're done. Like, they're going to get eaten because there's nowhere for them to hide. So those smallmouth will either sit on the sand or they'll just sit on the edges of the rock. When something comes scooting across, it gets eaten. Same thing with grass. If there's a grass flat and there's a sand patch in there, that's where they're going to be. They're going to be on the edges of that sand, on that sand patch. At least the concentrations of them generally are. So that's what I like to look for when I'm smallmouth fishing. Rock, sand, grass, any combination of the two. Really like sand amongst rock. So that's my approach for smallmouth. Now for largemouth, there's a couple different ways that I'll attack them. Different areas of the lake as far as structure. I'm going to do a lot of craw tube, fishing. So for largemouth, this is an absolute staple up north. For whatever reason, and around the rest of the country, it hasn't really caught on. But you get up Wisconsin, Minnesota, you talk to people about fishing summer largemouth, 99% of them are going to say they use a craw tube. So it's a little bit bigger profile. You know, it still has the tube shape, but it has these big pinchers on there. And this I like to fish 22 or 25 pound fluorocarbon, 5/0 hook. Typically, you know, heavy vegetation will have it pegged. Open water, I'll have it unpegged. And I really like to fish this around grass. In Wisconsin, Minnesota, we have a lot of that 12 to 15 foot grass lines, whether it's, you know, we get a lot of cabbage, we get a lot of coontail, and a lot of those bigger fish in the summer will move out to those edges of that grass. So thick patches, you kind of punch around the edges of it, cast it down the edges of the grass. A craw tube is just a big fish catcher. So you can also skip it around docks, any visible cover, but I really like to fish it in the grass. Now when the grass gets real thick, then I'm going to go to a punching setup, which a lot of people don't think about a tube for punching, say, milfoil or coontail, matted vegetation, but I do it a lot. In this I've got braid, I've got 60 pound Sunline FX2 braid, I've got a 7-foot 6-inch medium heavy, moderate fast action, St. Croix Legend Elite, 8 1-to-1 reel, something I can really pick up the line quick. And this baby has got a 3/4 or a 1 ounce pegged sinker. Very important that it's pegged because I'm punching it into visible cover. So I'll go down those same areas where maybe I fish the edges with that craw tube. A lot of times up on the top, they'll be matted up, you know, milfoil, coontail, whatever type of vegetation it is. And in those summer months when it gets really hot, those fish will really bury up in there, not only for the shade and the cover, but a lot of times that's where a lot of the bluegills are. And in the north, that's a lot of their primary forage fish that are around grass. It's bluegills. So this, I'll have that 4/0 K hook, and I'm just gonna punch it through the vegetation and wait for them to rip the rod out of my hand. So a lot of times people don't throw a tube, but it's perfect for punching because it's real slim. There's no appendages. It goes into the cover fast. It comes out fast. You'll find yourself wasting a lot less time picking stuff off of your bait because it's just so streamlined. So those are my favorite ways to fish for largemouth and for smallmouth with tubes in the summer months.